All right, so we're diving into Sapiens today. It's a pretty ambitious book, right? Covers, like, all of human history. But for those listening in, you're probably already familiar with at least the basics.
Yeah, Yuval Noah Harari really takes us on a ride, doesn't he? From the Stone Age to the future of artificial intelligence. It's a lot to unpack.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, we're going to try to hit the highlights, the major turning points that shaped Homo sapiens into the dominant species we are today. So where do we even begin with something this massive?
Well, I think Harari does a brilliant job of framing the whole story around three major revolutions: cognitive, agricultural, and scientific. Each one building on the last, each one pushing us further along this path.
Three revolutions.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. Gives us a nice structure. So let's start with that first one, the cognitive revolution. When does Harari place that, roughly?
Around 70,000 years ago, he describes it as a sudden leap in cognitive ability, a kind of mental upgrade that sets the stage for everything that follows.
70,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's still pretty recent considering Homo sapiens have been around for, what, like 2.5 million years?
Yeah, it puts things into perspective, doesn't it? For the vast majority of our existence as a species, we were just kind of hanging out, not doing much that would distinguish us from other animals. But then, boom, something changes.
That, boom, that's the cognitive revolution. So what triggered it? What does Harari say about the causes?
Well, there are a lot of theories, but one of the most compelling he presents focuses on the impact of fire and cooked food.
Fire and food. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think about it. Fire wasn't just about staying warm or scaring off predators. It revolutionized our diet. Cooking made food easier to digest, which over time led to shorter intestines. And believe it or not, that seemingly minor anatomical change had huge implications for our brain development.
Wait, so you're telling me that shorter guts equals bigger brains?
In a way, yeah. Shorter intestines meant less energy needed for digestion, freeing up resources that could then be directed towards developing larger, more complex brains. Essentially, fire helped us evolve not just our behavior, but our very physiology.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So fire, in a sense, helped kickstart our cognitive abilities. But Harari also argues that there's something else that sets us apart, right? Something beyond our biology.
Exactly. He points to language, our ability to communicate complex ideas, as our true superpower. He introduces this concept of imagined realities, things that exist solely because we collectively believe in them.
Imagined realities. Like what? Give me an example.
Think about gods, nations, corporations, even abstract concepts like justice or human rights. These aren't tangible things like mountains or rivers. They exist because we believe they exist, because we share stories and ideas that give them meaning.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this. So
Yeah.
money, for example, it's just paper and metal, right? But it has immense power over our lives because we've collectively agreed to believe in its value.
Precisely. And this power of shared belief, this ability to construct these imagined realities, is at the heart of what makes Homo sapiens unique. It allows us to cooperate on a massive scale, to build complex societies, to achieve things no other species can even dream of.
So it's almost like we've built our entire civilization on a foundation of shared stories and beliefs.
That's a pretty good way to put it. And it makes you wonder, are we really in control, or are these imagined realities controlling us?
It's a question worth pondering. But before we get too deep into that rabbit hole, maybe we should shift gears a bit and talk about another key aspect of the Sapiens story, our impact on the planet.
Right. Harari uses a pretty striking example to illustrate this, the megafauna extinction in Australia. Imagine. About 45,000 years ago, sapiens arrive in Australia.
And I'm guessing those giant kangaroos and marsupial lions they had weren't too happy about that.
Well, they weren't around for very long after that. Within a few thousand years, most of the megafauna vanishes. Harari presents a few possible scenarios: climate change, human hunting, or maybe a combination of both. But the timing strongly suggests that our arrival played a significant role in this ecological upheaval.
So even back then, we were already leaving a pretty big footprint on the environment.
Yeah, and this early example of human impact foreshadows a trend that intensifies with the next big turning point in our story, the agricultural revolution. Roughly 12,000 years ago, we shift from foraging to farming. But was this truly a step forward for humanity? Harari offers a more nuanced view, suggesting it might have been a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay, so how does he frame this agricultural revolution? As pure progress or something more complicated?
He uses this analogy of the luxury trap. Settling down and farming led to increased food production, sure, allowed for larger populations and more stable communities. But it also meant longer working hours, increased dependence on specific crops, and vulnerability to things like famine and disease.
So not exactly the carefree life we often imagine when we think about early farmers.
Not quite. The agricultural revolution wasn't a singular event with universal benefits. It was a gradual process with far-reaching consequences, both positive and negative, that continue to shape our world today.
And those consequences weren't just limited to our relationship with the environment, right? I imagine agriculture also had a huge impact on how we structured our societies.
Absolutely. As populations grew and settlements became more permanent, new forms of social organization emerged, hierarchies developed, complex systems of governance became necessary to manage larger, more diverse communities. And this is where Harari's concept of those imagined hierarchies becomes really important.
Right, those imagined hierarchies. We talked about how they determine social roles, access to resources, even our understanding of justice. So how did agriculture factor into all of this?
It amplified those hierarchies, basically. As societies became more complex, those shared beliefs about who's superior and who's inferior, they became even more entrenched. And to illustrate this, Harari contrasts the American Declaration of Independence, which emphasizes equality, with something like the Code of Hammurabi from ancient Babylon.
The Code of Hammurabi, that's the one with all the an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth
Well,
stuff.
exactly. It lays out a very hierarchical system of justice where punishment varies depending on your social status. And these contrasting views of justice, Harari argues, show how different societies imagine different forms of social order.
Okay, so we're seeing how these imagined hierarchies, fueled by the changes brought about by agriculture, really start to shape the course of human history. This is all before we even get to writing, which I have a feeling is going to shake things up even further.
Oh, you have no idea. The invention of writing, that's a whole other revolution in itself. And it's going to take those imagined realities to a whole new level. But we'll save that for part 2 of this deep dive.
All right, cliffhanger. I'm already hooked. Listeners, we'll be right back after a short break. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the invention of writing. I have to admit, I'm a little bit of a book nerd, so this part always gets me excited. I mean, just imagine a world without the written word. It's almost impossible, right?
Yeah, it's hard to overstate the impact writing had on human societies. It was truly a revolutionary technology. In a way, it allowed us to extend our minds beyond the confines of our own skulls, to capture thoughts and ideas and transmit them across time and space.
Yeah. Before writing, knowledge was primarily passed down orally. Stories, songs, rituals, that kind of thing. But with writing, knowledge could be codified, standardized, and most importantly, controlled.
Exactly. And this control over information, that's where things get interesting. Harari actually distinguishes between full scripts, like the alphabets we use today, capable of expressing a wide range of ideas, and partial scripts, which were designed for more specific purposes.
Partial scripts. Give me an example.
Think about the early forms of writing, like cuneiform in Mesopotamia. It was primarily used for accounting, tracking transactions, managing inventories, not so much for writing poetry or philosophical treatises.
So it was more about managing the day-to-day business of a society, less about expressing abstract ideas or individual creativity.
Exactly. And even these early partial scripts had a huge impact. They allowed for the administration of vast empires, the standardization of laws, the collection of taxes. They essentially provided the infrastructure for building larger, more complex societies.
As those societies became more complex, I imagine those imagined hierarchies we talked about, those shared beliefs about social order, they became even more entrenched, right?
Precisely. Writing essentially provided a tool for solidifying those hierarchies. Think about the Code of Hammurabi, for example. It wasn't just a set of laws, it was literally carved in stone for all to see, for all to obey.
So it's like those abstract ideas about social order, about justice and punishment, they become much more concrete, much harder to challenge.
Exactly. And this idea that technology can be used to reinforce power structures, it's a theme that resonates throughout history. Just as writing allowed for a centralization of knowledge and power in ancient times, today we see similar dynamics at play with digital technologies.
Okay, so from clay tablets to social media algorithms, it's all about who controls the information, who shapes the narrative.
Precisely. And this control over information has profound implications for how we understand the world, how we make decisions, even how we define our own identities.
It's a lot to think about. But before we spiral down that rabbit hole too far, maybe we should bring it back to Sapiens and see where Harari takes us next in this epic tale of human progress.
Well, he shifts focus to the rise of empires. As writing systems spread, so did empires. And Harari highlights how these vast empires, despite their often brutal methods, actually played a key role in shaping the interconnected world we live in today.
So those empires, which we often think of as oppressive and exploitative,
Hmm.
also had a hand in bringing people and ideas together.
It's a complex legacy, for sure. Harari doesn't shy away from the violence and exploitation that often accompanied imperial expansion, but he also acknowledges the role empires played in spreading technologies, fostering trade, and sometimes even promoting a sense of shared identity among diverse populations.
It makes you wonder, is that kind of large-scale unification something that's inevitable in the course of human history? I mean, Harari even talks about the possibility of a future global empire.
He does, and it's certainly a thought-provoking idea. With the rise of globalization, the interconnectedness of the global economy, and the emergence of international organizations, it's not as far-fetched as it might seem at first glance.
A single global empire. It's a concept that both excites and terrifies me. I mean, imagine a world without war, a world where resources are managed efficiently for the benefit of all humankind. But then again, could we ever really achieve that kind of unity without sacrificing individual freedoms and cultural diversity?
Those are the million-dollar questions, and as we've seen throughout history, there are no easy answers. Every step forward, every innovation, every revolution comes with its own set of trade-offs and unintended consequences.
Which brings us to the next chapter in our Sapiens deep dive, the scientific revolution. And I have a feeling this one's going to be a real game changer, ready to explore it.
Absolutely. The scientific revolution, as Harari describes it, was more than just a collection of new discoveries. It was a fundamental shift in our approach to knowledge, a willingness to embrace uncertainty and challenge established truths. And that shift in thinking had profound consequences, both for better and for worse.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. Let's dive into the scientific revolution and see where it takes us. We've journeyed through the cognitive revolution, the agricultural revolution, the invention of writing, the rise and fall of empires. It's been quite a ride through human history. But I think we've saved the best for last, right? The scientific revolution. What makes this period so pivotal in the Sapiens story?
You know, it's funny, we often think of revolutions as these sudden dramatic upheavals, but the scientific revolution was more like a slow burn, a gradual shift in thinking that ultimately transformed our entire understanding of the world.
A slow burn that set the world on fire, you could say.
Exactly. And what ignited that fire was a willingness to question everything, to challenge those old assumptions, to embrace uncertainty and say, we don't know all the answers, but we're going to figure them out.
It's like humanity collectively decided to ditch the dogma and embrace the scientific method. Observation, experimentation, testing hypotheses, and the results, well, they speak for themselves.
I mean, think about the sheer scope of discoveries made during this period. The laws of physics, the principles of chemistry, the workings of the human body. It was like we were suddenly seeing the world in a whole new light.
And this new way of seeing the world wasn't just about knowledge for knowledge's sake. It led to practical applications, technological innovations that transformed our lives. Medicine, agriculture, transportation, communication, it all changed.
And those changes keep coming faster and faster. Harari really emphasizes the accelerating pace of scientific and technological advancements, especially in fields like artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. We're pushing the boundaries of what's possible further than ever before.
Which is exciting, but also kind of terrifying, right?
Yeah.
So where do we draw the line? How do we ensure that these powerful new technologies are used for good, not for harm?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a question that Harari forces us to confront. He doesn't shy away from the ethical dilemmas, the existential risks. He wants us to think deeply about the implications of these technologies, to have those tough conversations about what kind of future we want to create.
It's like we're standing on the edge of a precipice. On one hand, we have the potential to solve some of humanity's biggest challenges, to create a world of abundance and well-being. But on the other hand, there's the risk of unintended consequences, of technologies spinning out of control, of creating a future that's more dystopian than utopian.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? To harness this incredible power responsibly, ethically, to think not just about the what of scientific progress, but also about the why and the how, to consider the long-term implications, not just the short-term gains.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Sapiens, we're left with a sense of both awe and trepidation. Awe at the incredible ingenuity and adaptability of our species, but also a healthy dose of caution. A reminder that progress isn't always linear, that every step forward comes with the potential for missteps and unintended consequences.
I think what Harari does so brilliantly is he doesn't provide easy answers. He
No.
doesn't tell us what the future holds. Instead, he equips us with the tools to ask the right questions, to engage in those critical discussions, to make informed choices that will shape the destiny of our species.
And ultimately, that's what this deep dive has been all about. It's not just about learning about the past. It's about using that knowledge to navigate the present and shape a future that we can all be proud of. A future that's more just, more sustainable, and more fulfilling for all of humankind. So as you continue to ponder the ideas we've explored in this episode, ask yourself, what role do you want to play in shaping the future of Homo sapiens? What choices, big or small, can you make to ensure that our story continues in a way that honors the best of what our species is capable of? Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of humankind. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.